The shade of your skin turns from black to red, upon your shade being red. Not seen, see. Your race determines whether your race is run. Whether your race is won, and sun, the intensity of the sun determines that. Not the might of the mind or the muscle, but melanin. And for that many men have died. Malcolm and Martin to name a few. I mean, more rest in peace, and maybe equality will come. And then again, maybe not. You see, 400 years of pain resulted in some years of fame. And for the movement, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, he still survives on Jim. You see, stereotypes have seeped into black culture, where how you're born doesn't even matter. And if you don't tick those stereotypical boxes, then your black life doesn't matter. You raise militias of men built of mud, meanness and madness. To spit bars, they find themselves behind the scars of stereotypes, find women not shrewd, but simply sexual objects. And these few are the only let through. Those who don't conform, those who want change, won't get through. And the police have marked out the black to make red of blue, to bloody their boots, to incarcerate the shrewd, to kill the rude. America has not a police force, but an army. That's America. Back home in Africa, implications for imperialism have insane effects. And the seeds of prosperity have been sown, but the weeds of disparity still have grown. Back home, all the birds have flown. The abused earth limps and groans. And across the continent, there are few Protestants to the system of division first implicated through European imposition. And the faults of their forefathers untangibly linked to the faults of ours. Faults are plentiful as the stars. Stars which we try to mask with light we create for ourselves. We look down so we don't have to see it. No matter how far those stars, they'll shine bright. Maybe it's time to make a few more decisions. Not faults for us to fall, but for Africa to rise together. They say the sun shines not on those who kneel, but those who stand before it. And for this, we will stand tall with Pan-African prowess. Let's start not there, but here. Let's focus in. Let's dry the tears of that poor boy suffering the epidemic of deadbeats. Rest easy, see. You'll stand on those 2 feet, you'll start to eat. You'll grow and greet others and see spectacles and be a child, a teen, an adult, and you'll meet the love of your life. And if you're lucky enough to be a father, you'll see that you've succeeded without that deadbeat. And you'll never be he who abandoned you. You'll see, because you're not common. You're a comet, flying faster than a rocket, and he thought he was fast too. Like light water, quick, and quiet, and clever. No, he's a confused quark. Once up, now down, all strange, no charm. Energy a shade too dark, a black hole in a heart. No, all he is a dark matter. And for all of these dark matters, how many black lives matter? How many whippings and lynchings? How many hearts will be splattered? How many shootings and lootings? How many will lose their roots? How many Stephen Lawrences? How many Philando Castiles? How many blacks will bite the bullet like it's past the parcel? All this pain, falling like drops of rain, across the places, across the space. How could there be so much sorrow? Only one race.
Absolutely. I feel like you're trying to take my job. That's what I feel like he's trying to do. I feel like if Jerwood was to see you before me, then you would be a fellow out in these streets. This is how I feel like what you're trying to do to. And you know what it is? I felt the exact same feeling when I heard not only yourself, but your classmates, who some of which are your friends, at UCL, that so two moons ago type thing, you know. It's like, yeah, and I was really taken back by just the performance. Edward, it's a pleasure to see you again.
Great to see you too. It's great to see you.
And it's a pleasure to hear your poem. I feel like there's a full circle that's happening, and I really want to I want to ask you about, I don't know if you can think that far back, that couple winters back or what have you, and to that time, to that stage, to UCL, to that the building. How did you feel knowing that you was about to go on the stage and read these poems? What was your whole process like in that whole? What was that like?
Well, it was quite nerve-wracking because although like I'd done performances like in school and things like that, um, this was out like in UCL, and I wasn't really used to performing like that in front of people that I didn't really know. Um, and as well as this, like they were quite heavy hitting poems. They were quite strong, and I was just afraid like how language that strong would go down. Talking about issues that sensitive. So I was quite mindful of that. So it was quite nerve wracking.
And even though you was mindful of it, you were so brave, and you still you stood right up on that stage, and you read that work deep in your heart. And you have a fan like Gioncarlo. Gioncarlo is like, oh, Edward's here. Edward's here. Like, like Edward wrote the poem. Edward. I was like, yeah, Edward wrote the poem. Edward. And Jill was just like, yeah, like 100%, just happy. Do you know what I mean? But also was extremely happy that everyone read poems that afternoon, and it was tense. It was within Black History Month, and for you just to get on that stage and to read your piece of work, it really inspired me to read my work also. And I guess I wanted to ask you about when it comes to talking about difficult subject matters in a way that you've just absolutely just kicked us off with that amazing poem. How is it for you? How is that process like for you in terms of just writing a poem like that? Where do you go to? Where do you source your research from? Do you talk to anyone about it, or do you kind of zone out in your own self and just crack on with the poem?
I think it's more sort of the latter. Um, I don't like the way I write poems is very sort of irregular, and it just sort of comes to me if I'm seeing something around me that becomes provoking enough that I feel as if I have to write on it. And that's not just political; it's just things I see around me that just sort of urge me to write, rather than sort of me planning it out.
Mm, mm. Your collective, how are they? How would it are you still in touch with any of them? Like, do you all still rap poems? How, because you were a vibrant bunch, that collective, man. It felt like I needed some kind of like a permission to be part of the clique. Do you see what I mean? I just needed to be. Do you still write together? How was that? Do you see some of them? How was that whole process with them?
Well, they all go to the same school.
Mm.
Some went to different schools, but most we're still all in the same sixth form, so we still see each other regularly. I'm not sure how much they're writing, but I know definitely like with everything that happened during COVID season with George Floyd and everything, um, like they
Mm.
were really affected by that, and so I definitely know the effect that that's had on them. It hasn't been good for any of us.
I have to ask you this question because it's something that I tackle in the essay, and when I was asked to do a reading at UCL, I wasn't aware of the the eugenics that was practiced there, and I felt a different sense of um, purpose when it came to reading the piece of work, because I felt like if things didn't go how it went, then I don't know if my race would just be existing. And there's something about that you touch in your poem. And For one, I didn't know if you were aware of the history in UCL, but in the event that you wasn't, for example, if in knowing potentially that there are institutions that potentially had these kind of researchers in there, and this was happening many years ago, or what have you, do you think having that knowledge, you would go into these buildings having a different sense of purpose because you are aware? And it's a bit of a big question, but do you
Yeah.
feel like in knowing these things, if you knew, if you known about it in advance, you would go into there with just a different sense of like, okay, cool, this is my worth, and I know at some point it probably didn't mean nothing to any of you, but I know of your history. Do you think those things matter? And right now in this time that we're living in?
Yeah, but I think generally, if something's old enough, you're probably going to find something which is like extremely bigoted within its history. So I didn't
Mhm.
actually know about the eugenics which went on within UCL, but I could wager that there's skeletons in the closet of UCL or Oxford or any really institution that has lasted a long time, and by a long time that can be as young as like
Mm.
God knows, because Civil Rights Act only that was 50 years ago. So
Mm.
when people talk about racism in the past, it's important to remember that we're just talking about yesterday or 2 weeks ago, because it isn't very far back. So like, whilst that specific case is new to me, I already go in with the expectation that there's probably
Mm.
racist closets, racist skeletons in the closet. Um,
And I suppose in you knowing that, potentially it's amazing to just have for me to think about the fact that you could be talking to your friends about this and being like, we just need to be more aware, and this is how we can be more aware, by just knowing that all these different buildings might have their skeletons in their closets and wherever it is, and just going in with that knowledge of just of knowing that. And I'm already like, I'm already pre-ordering your book that you're going to be releasing God knows when. I'm ready to kind of chase you down for like an autograph, because I feel like when I heard your work that time, I felt like you are someone that I'm very, very, very eager to listen to more, and I couldn't have felt more proud that afternoon. And I feel prouder now that you're just here and you read it with such conviction in the same way that you read it the last time. So thank you very, very much. Thank you for being part of this project and this journey. This feels like a personal full circle for myself. Because I was getting cussed, bruv. Gio was cussing me. Gio was like, listen, you need to write this. You need to write this piece and write it now. And it took me so long for me to write it. But the universe does have its moments, and I feel like this is perfectly timed for us to connect in this way. So thank you for the time, and thank you for sharing your piece of work. I appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate how much you appreciated it. I really do. It's quite flattering to hear someone speak about the work that I've done like that. So thank you for that.
Now, big up you, big up your friends, big up Cardinal Pole Catholic School also. And yeah, man, we'll talk soon for sure. Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in this world. Like, thank you so much for just being part of this program, this sitting, this kind of like, I don't know whether you're in your car or you're in your front room or somewhere. It's almost like the driving of drive-ins. This is it. This is it. The new normal. And in saying that, I hope you're all keeping safe during these really strange times. My name is Yomi Sode. It's a pleasure to be presenting this to you tonight by way of Jerwood. It's an honor to be a fellow of Jerwood, and to also premiere this as part of the Jerwood Compton Poetry Fellowship series. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you to yourselves for taking the time. Secondly, thank you to the participants that are part of this potential project that I worked on. Gioncarlo Valentine, Edward, who is a rep of Cardinal Pole Catholic School. Big up everyone at Cardinal Pole Catholic School for making this happen. This is a project that is dear to me. It's literally 2 years in the making. And yeah, there are some heartfelt discussions around race. There's some discussions around the societal norms that we're living in at the moment, and a way forward, potentially. And it would just be amazing if you just sit through and just take in everything and message me, follow the folks, and just keep in touch. And yeah, I'm stopping my waffle. Boy, I can't follow what just happened in regards to Edward and that poem. I'm glad I'm not even reading this piece of work to a certain degree, and you're going to be hearing it, because that was amazing, right? Absolutely awesome. And it's that stayed with me for so long, and that makes this a deeper thing for me in terms of why it had to be written, and why I felt as though I would want not only folks like Edward to hold and to read it, but generally the students that I came across at the time. And yeah, I hope you enjoy, and take care. Bye. On Uniformity. It's 1996. The Spice Girls inject wannabe into the bloodstreams of popular culture. Oprah Winfrey starts her book club. eBay launches their online auction shopping site, and a young man named Sean Carter releases his debut album, Reasonable Doubt. I, on the other hand, I'm not jetting off to a hot island for a video shoot or signing autographs as part of my world tour. I find myself instead at home in the cavities of London's Aylesbury estate. I'm standing in front of my mirror, dressed for school, even though I'm not going to school, practicing how to tie a tie, and soon realizing how difficult a task it would be. I remember counting down the days until secondary school started, not knowing how to do this one simple thing. I'd wake up early hours in the morning to practice, looping knot after knot into something actually resembling a tie, rather than a ball of yarn. Trying to get it right. Now, in my adult years, I think back to that moment. I think about the Nigerian kid whose mother migrated to England alone. The kid that grew and was told to make something of himself and work 3 times harder than his white counterparts. I now understand the stress that kid carried, the projections from family to get it right. Fast forward to October 4th, 2018. It's National Poetry Day, and I'm stood in front of a mirror, prepping for my reading at UCL late in the afternoon. I'm wearing a 3-piece tweed suit with no tie. I know what you're thinking, and no, I didn't give up on them. In fact, I learned how to tie a tie from Doyen and Stephanie. Mum's prayer for me to be safe in school was answered in the form of 2 black women, also Nigerian, 4-year groups older than me, who guided me through my first year. We lived close to each other, and most mornings I'd meet them by the stairs and we'd walk to school together. It's here that I experienced belonging, understood identity, and found friendship for the first time. It's also where I started to understand intimacy, the lightest touch of a crush. Occasionally, I see groups of black kids walking to or from school, cracking jokes in all forms in their flamboyance, and immediately I'm transported to memories of my walks with Doyen and Steph, of me asking for tips on how to talk to girls, which led to both of them laughing and chasing me down the road to apologize for laughing. I mean, a parent tying my tie was one thing, but girls near my age bracket entering my personal space, grabbing both strands of my tie, while staring dead into my eyes and speaking to me. Yeah, it left a memory I wouldn't forget. Funny thing, I remember the relief in hearing them speak about the expectations set before them, not only as Nigerians, but as black women. Up till this point, I thought it was just an individual burden set from my elders. Similar to me choosing to wear a suit for the proceedings of the day, my choice to not wear a tie was a form of rebellion, the greater context of which lies deep in the decisions made for or on my behalf, how this control has built up over time, with little say-so from me. In 1987, Ghanaian-born Achaba Adai Sebo changed the landscape for black British people by introducing Black History Month UK, a month to celebrate black history and culture every October of every year. Inspired by Carter G. Woodson's Negro History Week, which began in February 1962, later extending to Black History Month post the Civil Rights Movement in 1969, Sebo felt the urgency to create something similar in the UK. In an article via Face to Face Africa, Sebo states, "I was stirred up in the mid-1980s by the identity crisis that black children faced, as some brazenly would not identify with Africa and shrank when called an African. A colleague came to work one morning, broken-hearted, and in probing her, she revealed to me in confidence that her 7-year-old son, who she had proudly and purposely named Marcus after Marcus Mosiah Garvey, a foremost black nationalist leader, before going to bed had asked her, 'Mum, why can't I be white?' He continues, I was prompted to go around asking questions about identity and to observe and talk to children more after school, in buses, parks, and in the playgrounds, in the communities, in some parts of London. I was awakened to the fact that even some Ghanaians try to mimic being Afro-Caribbeans, and some Afro-Caribbeans will take offense being referred to as African. I walked into UCL that afternoon, feeling like a tourist and marveling at the pavilion. Glancing upwards, I was soon blinded by the sun, almost as if it was telling me that I did not have the right to even look. I closed my eyes instead, still seeing its frame within the darkness. I was so overdressed that it felt like even the pigeons were whispering to each other like, bruh, too much, too much. But my decision to roast like a barbecue underneath my suit was as much political as it was to be presentable. A Black History Month banner was spread across the front of the pavilion, high enough to notice, easy enough to walk under or ignore. All of it felt slightly awkward. To my surprise, I was met by a group of predominantly black schoolchildren who had brought up poems to read, a curtain raiser of sorts before the main acts. The students were gassed, and who could blame them? For me, aside from English and PE, a school trip was up there in the list of exciting things to do, especially when it came to me performing. It was always a team thing, a uniformity in knowing if one person messed about, it impacted all of us. I felt the same energy with this group. One by one, they stepped up to the lectern to read. They cheered each other on, especially if there were stumbles or moments the poet stopped to recall a word. There they were, backing each other like a family would. I was excited for them. I imagined them being the same should a fight pop off or if a fall guy is required for a particular embarrassing task. I imagined them never leaving each other alone, whether gathered in groups at the back of a bus or randomly stopped and searched by the police. I was also a little sad in knowing the content of my poems that I was due to read. When I was asked to read at UCL, I was elated.
I think the organisers needed fishing rods in hooking my trouser pocket and reeling me back from the clouds. I was beaming. I immediately knew the poems I would share. However, I was sent historical links to read and listen to in the lead up to the event in October. One of those links was a podcast by UCL historian and curator Sabadra Das called Bricks and Mortals. This will be the moment my perceptions of these kinds of institutions completely changed. Francis Galton coined the term eugenics in 1883. Eugenics, or being well born, is described by the Oxford Dictionary as the study of how to arrange reproduction within a human population to increase the occurrence of heritable characteristics regarded as desirable. Galton, as well as Carl Pearson and Maurice Stopes, who were also known eugenicists, believed that white people are the superior race, the superhuman, and the need for them to reproduce with the eventuality of stopping the race degeneration of the poor working class, which they believed was made up of basically any race other than white. For them, black people were odd looking, with broad noses and dark skin, etc. Studies in the Petrie Museum also found that research was carried out regarding the intellect of black people based on the measurements of their skull. This was believed to be inferior in comparison to the white race. By digging a bit deeper, I found that not only was the research carried out within these confines of UCL, but there were actual buildings named after Galton and Pearson. So, there I was, booked to read poems in Black History Month at an institution that celebrated people who never wanted me to exist. What does uniformity represent? Who does it speak to? Does it change a person in any way, or is it a collective of people adhering to some kind of groupthink mentality? Questions like these have sat with me for a while. I have found that uniformity to be something that is malleable, whether at school or at an office job, serving time in jail or on a sports team. If there's anything I've understood it to be, it's authority and the ownership of a body and mind via a set of clothing, leaving little autonomy over self. We arrive at 2020, post the murder of George Floyd ad infinitum, sparking the last straw of black people, leading to the current global response of Black Lives Matter protests and marches. We find an array of statues of white men linked to the enslavement, torture and colonization of black people. Statues left to breathe the same air of the very lives they've affected, being pulled down, dumped in lakes or beheaded. The people have had enough and begun stripping these uniforms off, physically and mentally. When Doyen knotted my tie, it tended to lean to the left. When Steph did it, it was central but too round, as if it was stuffed with other layers. When I learned to do it, it veered a little to the right and was slim. Both of them said their way was best. Uniformity not being something systematic, but also something innately cultural and out of fear. A thing I found in my later years as a list of instructions to follow and or abide by to avoid being on the losing end. When my uncles, aunties and black teachers drilled into my head that I had to work 3 times as hard, it was because they wanted me to get a decent house, earn good money and provide for my family in the future. They considered racism from whites as a major concern, but I doubt they ever thought that the losing end would be the deaths of black people at the hands of the uniformity of police or the scaremongering of white people. What is scarier for my elders now is the part where, in these altercations, where being seen and not heard is the last thing on our minds. I too hold residues of my elders' anxieties. My boy is old enough to make some sense of the world now, and as a father, I wonder how much of him will be lost in this uniformity of society's norms regarding how he should be. It would be silly of me to not think about the black kids I see on my daily commute and not wonder about the weights they carry as the odds are stacked against them. Black kids repeatedly told one type of history. Black kids open-mouthed as if waterboarded and fed on truths until they comply. Black kids having to choose between being marked down by a racist algorithm or a racist teacher. In the 2 hours I shared the stage with these students, I thought about people like Doyen and Steph, who prepped me for the world outside of school. I thought Mr. Edwards, my PE teacher, who constantly reminded me of how different I was to others. I thought about the many black kids that walk into buildings getting that weird feeling and soon told it's nothing. But intuition is a superpower that shouldn't be ignored. The rumbling of a fucked upness of a situation. Once told it's nothing, I want the kids to ask themselves again, but what if it's something? The ancestors warning them of the bones buried in the walls surrounding them. I read new poems that afternoon, not because it was suggested for me to do so. It just felt necessary. The superhuman. And sure enough, a bus 63 is no Concorde, nor is it in the sticks, but its roots from Euston to my mother's home reminds me of a London town I've grown to know. Past a hostel residing not too far from Scala nightclub, inside, a girl lives on the 3rd floor, and most mornings she opens her blinds looking at buildings that block the sun. Journey further through Farringdon, look out for the Freeword Centre on the left, past the market on the right, carry on to the Blackfriars Bridge, where roughly 9 years ago I sat in a police interrogation room being questioned regarding an incident that still has me numb to this day. Everything playing out like I've seen in the movies. Change for a bus 343 at Elephant and Castle. Follow the route round a bend to what is used to be the Haygate Estate, where a youth club housed, fed and entertained children 4 evenings a week until a government thought little of their worth, leached their funds and replaced them with new builds, new people, a cleanse. Follow the bend and you will arrive at the Aylesbury Estate, where Tony Blair once famously made his Forgotten People speech, ironically never returning like the old residents of the Haygate, and there, right there, you'll find my mother, all Nigerian in her demeanour, a matriarch of her household, surrounded outside by rubble, by people watching the clock counting down until the wrecking ball knocks a lifetime of memories into dust. And there's irony in this poem about the superhuman as I stand, an Aylesbury Estate resident, speaking within this building, wondering whether Galton or Stopes are spinning in their graves, speaking within this space, knowing I've seen guns, violence, celebration, weddings, childbirths, graduations, funerals. I've experienced racism, microaggressions, opportunities, losses, wins, unfair treatment, and days like today. Reading here, knowing historically, it's men never considered me or my body, that caged my intelligence by the measurement of my skull. But today, my God, will it hear my voice? My God, will it shake off any doubt in my mind that this voice is going anytime soon? And isn't that super? After I read, the energy pulled us together. It felt like a classic beach scene where two people on opposite sides run towards each other to meet in the middle. On one side, my side, were folks wanting to set up the mic post-show interviews. On their side were teachers rounding them up to leave. We didn't care. Our ruckus of compliments leaving us within this feeling that resonated amongst us all. A language that only we spoke, and a connection that only we felt. One of the students asked if I was Nigerian because he recognized my name. He also wrote poems and said it was inspiring to watch me perform, and for a moment, I almost wished I hadn't worn this suit. A uniform he might leave thinking is the way forward in order to be accepted or listened to. I told him to make sure the world heard his poem. And by that, I meant let no one tell you you can't occupy space, because you can. I read poems in my 3-piece suit as a fuck you, I'm alive and wearing the shit out of this suit in being alive. I read it loud and with all my Adai Sebo energy. I read it loud in the pavilion so passers-by will stop and listen. I read it loud to the professors secretly still loving the works of these eugenicists. I read it loud for Michaela Cole's Alliance, thinking about these black students in groups, looking joyful, and the countless members of black students in a country that still have been made to feel other, as though they do not belong. I read it to equip them with knowledge about something I too found out about recently. So the next time they step foot in places like UCL, their heads will be held high with confidence and understanding. I read it loud to tell them that I am here, in the same way others were there for me at their age. No tie that afternoon. Just my top button open and my black existing.
Yeah, I can introduce myself.
So wait, this is, cause you know the strangest part of this whole situation is like
Mhm.
it's almost feels forced, but it's not forced.
It's not
Because
forced.
this is
It's just odd.
it is odd.
Yeah.
So you would just introduce yourself and just go for it. So how would you normally just introduce yourself? Like just
It's so simple. I'm a writer and photographer. I'm Gioncarlo Valentine. Um, Born, raised in Baltimore. Let me start over. I'm Gioncarlo Valentine. I'm a photographer and writer, born and raised in Baltimore, living in New York for the last 60 years. I work mainly in portraiture and write mainly in essay form, but slowly deviating from both of those kind of restrictions and writing scripts and photographing more journalistic stories that are not portrait specific. Trying to be a more spacious artist, so one who is not as confined as I've usually allowed myself to be.
yeah. I wasn't about to introduce myself like that at all. I'm just happy.
I'm Yomi.
Yeah.
That's it. Just
I'm
Yomi.
I'm just glad that you done just that. I'm just here. We're recording, by the way. We're
Great.
live. We're
Great.
good.
Great.
Um
Great.
why what was it with the images? Did when you arrived in London, was that like a thing that you wanted to do in the first instance, or was it just like, did you have a moment when you were just on your way out somewhere to go writing? Like what was it with just the whole thing with just the students and capturing just that?
I think so. When I first came to London, I don't know why this felt like the most foreign visual I'd ever seen, but I was staying on Pembury Road, and there are like three schools within, a block of this. So I had never seen, like, in America, in Baltimore, and in most of the places I've lived in New York, children wear regular clothes to school, or they wear their uniform, and their uniform is maybe khaki pants and a white shirt that says the school thing, or some variation of that, maybe a navy blue pant and a yellow shirt. But like, it isn't pageantry, like it isn't like more than just one, two. And to be honest, people don't really wear it. And when I was in high school, I had to wear a uniform, but I also I just never wore it. Like, I was one of the only students in my school who literally went from, for all 4 years of high school, I just never wore a uniform ever, like not ever.
Crazy.
I just didn't feel comfortable. Like, sometimes I'd wear the uniform shirt, but underneath I would have like fucking bell bottoms with a khaki short on top and like a heel. Like, I did whatever I wanted to do. And I've always had that kind of recalcitrance towards the idea of uniform when I started working. And I would have to go to job interviews. I just would never wear like a tie.
Yeah.
I would never do those things because, as a person whose gender is more fluid, I don't really I just don't never want to be confined in these ways. So when I came to London and I was staying in that area, I would look around. Like the first time I was there, my mind was blown. I like looked out of the window as the kids were getting out of school. I said, what the hell is this? And they all looked like gray little penguins. Like they all had the exact same outfit on. I was like, what is this? Like
Yeah.
I had never seen it. And like as the project, as as time went on, I started to understand, okay, there are places in America where you can see people wearing this kind of uniform, so it's not as special as I thought it was. But to me, it was such an extreme shock. And when I went out there, I would just sit outside and have my coffee, and all the kids would come, and it just looked crazy. It looked so strange.
Which is, on the flip side, I always wanted that freeness of not wearing a uniform. There was one school, Pimlico, we also used to say like, Pimlico kids can wear what they want to go to school. Damn, like you just want to go to the school, because the whole thing of the uniform and the tie stuff, I just hated it. I hated the thought of it. Later on, I was just like, hey, that might have been the best plan, to wear a uniform, because it's a stressful thing trying to figure out what to wear every single day. Like it's too stressful to try to figure out what I'm wearing every day, how I'm gonna sort myself out to go to school, and then people notice if you're wearing the same clothes twice in 1 week or something like that, and then it's like you're gonna get ridiculed, you can get close to being bullied, and then things just got a bit different. But it's interesting that you're talking about landscapes and the culture on your side, in terms of outside of the bubble there is a different kind of culture that happens, and for you it took you a beat just to be like, oh, so this is just how the situation is here. Did it take you, how long did it take you just to assimilate, just to kind of process and be like, okay, if this is one form of structure that's happening, I wonder what else is happening that's different to my landscape and where I'm from?
Well, I think I just had such a strong, I mean, my curiosity, at least with the photos, went straight to identity politics. Like, you know, everything is very rigid here in particular ways. So, like, Africa. So, when I went to London, I was like, okay, with African American people, a lot of us, our ancestry is rooted in slavery. A lot of us did not choose to be here. Whereas in London, a lot of people have moved to London, which means they come from a cultural heritage that they have that's intact, that they experience themselves in like a very lived in way. So a lot of my friends who I know in London have lived in Nigeria, have lived in Ghana, have lived in Sierra Leone before they moved to London, or even as children. So there was a period where they can remember wearing their cultural wares and however they dress and identified themselves back home, and then coming into London and kind of having that stripped away so that they can acclimatize to what the culture was here. And I remember within a week of seeing these school kids, I kept thinking like, I wonder what that feels like for these young children to have to like wear and have like to wear these uniforms and have their personalities kind of stripped away. Because when I think about uniform here and why it doesn't fit me, it goes a little bit even beyond gender, and it goes kind of into the carceral state. So like uniform to me almost automatically makes me think of prison uniforms. And so many of the schools, public schools, at least in Baltimore where I grew up, are treated and kind of positioned, unfortunately, like prisons. So it was always kind of a rejection of that notion, a rejection of the idea of gender, and it's a rejection of like the lack of personality you must possess in order to kind of be, you know, stripped in this way, to walk into the workplace and have to perform an identity that doesn't feel like your own, to walk into any space and have to like kind of just become one of the crowd when some people just can't do that from the onset. So I was really just interested in what the young people were losing in having to wear those uniforms. But then I thought, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
No, go.
But then I also thought about if young people who came here from other countries, it's extremely traumatizing to do that, to relocate to a new place, to be the new kid, but then also to have like, you know, maybe be from a culture in which you are not the dominant culture in this new space. And I know what bullying looks like in school. I know that a lot of people who come from different places get bullied and made fun of for the way that they dress and speak and all kinds of stuff. So I was wondering, does the uniform help at all? Does the uniform help you feel like you can fit in, like you can kind of sneak quietly into the background and just like be there, and not be ostracized in any way? So I thought it was like a two-sided coin, and I was just really interested in kind of documenting it from that perspective.
Wow. I think for first and foremost, even I wonder in regards to the young people now in terms of the students, you could talk in historically, and you're saying for African Americans in which that deep rooted in slavery, and Britain definitely has its hands in slavery as well, as you know as well. For the most part, I can, from even reading, I know as much that the Black community didn't come here by choice. But even within the Caribbean community, there was a Windrush, and folks were almost promised all these different things. Black folks were promised all these different things in Britain, only to come and just to find out it's a different situation entirely. To now that we're having folks from the Black community being deported back to the Caribbean and other places as well. So that in itself is a piece of history. And again, it's a different conversation. We're going to go off in a tangent in terms of there is such a huge historical context within the States, but at the same time within the UK in lies this deep history of racism, of ignorance, of be it slavery as well, that I almost wish there was more conversations about, because I see it all the time in Twitter, especially black Twitter, like, yeah, we gone through more trauma than you, and I'm just like, yo, why are we having this conversation continuously? Whereas there is this thing of just global trauma that we can all talk on. Speaking on that, going towards a younger generation, I wonder whether they are aware. Hence why this whole essay came into play. Like, just seeing the students read these poems in this institution, not necessarily knowing how deep rooted the history is in this building that was dealing with eugenics, and these men or what have you of a certain time that wanted the entire race to not exist. And I'm just like, how much of this history do you know, and whose responsibility is it for you to start knowing about these things a bit more? That's where I feel a bit sad in regards to it. And to a certain degree, you're right. Like I arrived in England when I was 9 years old. I arrived in England knowing fully well that I was a Nigerian kid. My uniform automatically was black. That was standing out like a sore thumb anyway. But then to try to assimilate in wearing a different kind of uniform, whereas I didn't speak English at the time, I was already at a loss in terms of trying to fit in. One thing that was for certain, if we were to kind of categorize this as some kind of uniformity, was that I'm Nigerian. I'm a black boy, and I know my community, and my community at that time was at home. Anything outside of that was just external. And I think now we're living in a time where we've got kids from the continent who are like third generation or what have you, that are fully embracing all of their blackness. And that adds to their own uniformity in a sense, irrespective of the of what attire they are wearing, what European attire they are wearing. But I hear you. And when it pertains to the black kids, to the students, when you saw them, did you, because some of them are smiling in them images, like when you was talking to them, how was that conversation in just sitting with them and just being like, oh, you just look joyful, like you're on your way to school, do you mind these shots? What was that conversation like with them?
It was so nice, but so when I came to see you speak, I think I maybe had been in London for 3 to 4 days. Like I
I
had
really
been there.
appreciated you coming to see that, reading
Yes,
that.
it was so special. It was just so special. I didn't know that Black History Month in London was in October. I didn't know anything. I had just come there excited to see a friend of mine and see you and to see a couple of other people. So when I went to see you read and I heard these young people Oh my! I mean, I was just floored, man. They were so brilliant, like so passionate, brilliant, and like raw, talented, and raw. Not to imply that they don't have any kind of like training or like that they were just coming out there spitting at random, but I mean, they were raw. Like I was like, what is going on? Like it was just insane. They were so incredible. Um, and you know, it was such a strange, it was so strange to be there. I don't even remember, I don't know where I was. It felt like I got dropped into the middle of nowhere in this foreign country, and here are all these Black kids who feel just like home and are so kind of like comfortable and confident and brilliant, and here you come in this like elaborate suit, and it was just beautiful, man. It was like clearly a white space. I remember looking at the people from below, like kind of just watching this gathering of Black people, and still I didn't really understand the fullness of what was happening. You told me afterwards the history that they had, eugenics, and you know what that space actually represented. But you can just gauge that. You can gauge that from the whiteness on campus and the white presence and the way that we all stuck out. But it felt tremendous. And, you know, when I was back on the streets in Hackney and I would just be like sitting in my cafe, I would see the kids coming by, and like, like when you're an adult in a new place and you're kind of alone, it's tough to just come over to people and be like, hey girl, be my friend, like talk to me. But like when I would be watching the kids, and they were just so, they just felt like back when I was in high school. It felt like I was home. And, you know, when I would be walking to my cafes and back and forth, sometimes I'd see like a group, a bunch of kids coming out of school at the same time. And, you know, I'm trying to remember the first pictures that I took, but I know the first ones that I took were of you and the kids speaking at your school, but kind of the first ones that I took where I thought, maybe this is a thing, was in Brixton, I think around Electric Avenue. And yeah, I mean, I just asked. I mean, I always ask. I do this in New York too. I do this on the streets. I photograph young people and adults, kind of street portraiture style, Jamel Shabazz style, where they like offer you the assurance that you can make an image of them. I'm not big in photographing people without their permission. As a photographer, some of these ethics and some of these boundaries and rules can get kind of gray, especially, and this is why this is such a hard project to talk about and contextualize, because in America, like, you can photograph people on the streets. Whether you get their permission or not, you can photograph them, and that's the end of the thing.
Wow.
For the most part, with publications, they're not asking you to have releases for people. So that's the way that I was trained. That's the way that I kind of like, you know, cut my teeth as a photographer. And it's also a very important way to work. And I think it can be read as unethical, and it is. And I think it is complicated. But I also think that the ways in which, for example, New York City has grown to this place of lure, to this place of like, when you close your eyes and you think of what New York looks like and feels like, a lot of that is from people making images on the street. A lot of the images that come to mind are from street photographers who have crafted the very image of New York that you see, the very way that people pursue the city as a place to come and dream. So I think that we just have a very different relationship to street photography here, and I don't make any excuses for it, because this was mostly white men who came into these spaces violently and who made images kind of without any kind of respect to the subject. And whether that is the way that we learned or not, it still is unethical. So, you know, I would ask the young people, and, you know, they would of course say yes when they heard my accent and they heard that I was, you know, coming from New York. Even though I'm from Baltimore, I was coming there from New York. They would lose their shit and start talking about power and do I know anybody from Power? And, you know, it's funny, when I first came to London, that first time, I had just shot Omari Hardwick from Power.
Oh,
So I actually did. And like, they would bring this Power thing up, and they would, like, if they ever looked at my Instagram, they would see it and they would go berserk. So it was a lot of fun talking to the kids and just like asking, can I make a photo? I would email them the photos back. And if they, you know, they would follow me and like DM me like, hey, can you get the photos, or when are they coming out? So that part was pretty easy and pretty normal, and it felt great. That was like one of the things that made London feel like a place that I really wanted to spend a great deal of time, because it just made me feel like I was home, but it also made me feel young and like excited in a different way.
I know that a part of your heart lies in London. Like, there's no time that you don't talk about it enough. It's a shame that we're doing this over Zoom and not here in person. For Auntie COVID knows how to try and spoil a party.
She's aggressive. She means business, and I mean business too.
Can we talk a bit about legacy?
Sure.
And what legacy means to you? You are taking images of beautiful Black people, even in regards to this set of pictures that you took for this specific project. You're taking pictures of Black kids that often are not seen to just be smiling in such a way and just being in their own full presence. What does that mean to you to just be capturing, or specifically this part of the community, the Black kids, whether it's Black kids, whether you're capturing the elder folks from the senior community? Like, what does that mean to you in terms of your own legacy that you're trying to create at this point in time?
Well, I mean, I think legacy is probably the defining factor in my work, but maybe not rooted in like applause for me and my legacy, but more kind of updating, challenging the legacy of Black people, period, visually. It brings me such distress to acknowledge how much I enjoy white photographers, like, who have photographed Black people. Foundationally speaking, if I think about Rosa Parks, if I think about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, if I think about Zora Neale Hurston and James Baldwin, if I think about any of the people whose legacies, Toni Morrison, if I think about all the people whose like historical importance for Black people, whose legacy we kind of live in, unfortunately, when I think of the image of these people, it is white photographers who got to document them. It is white photographers who got to live a life in which they went into these communities and were given access to our best and our brightest and our everyday. So even when you think of everyday Black people and you close your eyes, the visuals are from white photographers. So I think, that's despicable and it's disgusting. I really would argue, and I have argued this, and I really wish that it would happen, but I really wish that Black people, not a Black person on the face of the earth, would ever let a white person photograph them again. I think that the ways in which that white people have so violently wielded their camera, and even without violence in the way that we think about it, the presence of whiteness as violence, like the presence of, the idea that Chadwick Boseman died and maybe got to be photographed in the largesse of his career, like in the more prominent end of his career, he was photographed by maybe 3 Black people. The entire Black Panther tour, the entirety of the images that were made for magazine covers, even Black magazines like Essence, there were white photographers. The only Black photographer that got to photograph him for this was Kwaku Alston, who did it, and I think he did it from Marvel. So like, he didn't even get the opportunity to photograph him and be in conversation with him, like in a real, in the way that so many white people just cavalierly got to do. And now this man is dead. His legacy is sealed, but it's sealed in the fact that it was dominated by white photographers. And the kind of intention of white photographers is left to mystery, right? We just assume that these people are doing the job or that they mean well. And that's neither here nor there, I guess. But in reality, I really am so interested in this current crop of photographers who are, I'm in Chile, sorry, who are making work. Let me cut this fan off. Specifically, because I was like shaking and my lips were chattering, and I was like, girl, what is going on? It is not that cold. But I'm really interested in this group of photographers working today and their take on the everyday Black experience, and kind of grabbing the baton from people like Jamel Shabazz or Daoud Bey, Joseph Rodriguez, or, Eli Reed, or any photographers who maybe from the 70s, 80s, 60s, in some cases, 90s, had a camera and who documented our culture, from the everyday to the prominent, to the famous, to the great thinkers, to the great writers, to the great whatever. It's just so important that we be the people telling our own stories. And unfortunately, we just don't have a history of that. Not a prominent enough history of that.
And as a follow-on from that, congratulations on the recent publications.
Oh.
Having to sit down and just take these shots of Trevor Noah, for example. In them conversations, do you I kind of like, you know, when I go to my barbers, for example, and I have these, it's almost like an interesting relationship with your barbers and or soon to be hairdressers, because I'm getting my twist and everything. Like,
come on, twists.
I'm trying.
It looks good.
Like, it's always like this kind of awkward thing of like, do you make conversation? How do you talk? Like, what is it? How do you kind of build this? So if you're sitting with someone like you've taken shots of Michael B. Jordan, Omari Hardwick, you know, like you've sat with some amazing, incredible people. What's the conversation? Are there any convers? And I think, you know, do you apply in the same way that you was kind of taking the shots of the students to kind of get them into a comfortable space to almost share this moment with them? Do you apply your same skill sets with different people that you work with over time, or do you kind of do you gauge your space and kind of hold silence and just do what you're doing and just keep it moving?
Yes and no. So I photographed Andre Braugher for a cover of Variety recently. And it came out the day after the Trevor Noah cover. And these are two totally different experiences, totally different stories, circumstances, people, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, the Trevor Noah shoot was simple and it was fun. And he was very, very, very sweet. But he was very quiet, very shy. And he let us know he's like a relatively reserved person, even though he's like a boisterous comedian. You know, he's in his head a lot. And I get to photograph a lot of people who are just in their heads or who are not, you know, they're not about to give you much. They're private people, and that's just that. And Andre Braugher, I light up whenever I think about the photos of him, specifically because they're beautiful and I love them and I'm proud of them, but also because he has not been photographed a lot. So we talked at the beginning of the shoot, and he was like, yeah, I really don't do this. And I was like, it made me almost want to cry right at the beginning, because he said it with this kind of like demure energy where I was like, you know, I've literally watched you on TV since I was a baby, not a child, like a baby. I can't remember seeing this man on Law and Order, where my mom was Law and Order obsessed behind. When I was a child, this man has been on my television, usually playing a cop, for my entire life. And the idea that this Black man who is phenomenally gifted as an actor, hasn't had the opportunity to get a magazine shoot or be photographed for a magazine cover until this moment where he was nominated for an Emmy, challenged me so much. Because at the end of the day, like, that is the story of so many people, where everybody's rewatching Girlfriends right now on Netflix. And, you know, Girlfriends, one of the big things that Tracy Ellis Ross has spoken about is that she hasn't had they did not get the opportunity to go on one late night television show for the whole 8-year run. Wow. And, you know, they were not nominated for a bunch of stuff. They were treated like a kind of flavor of the month Black show, because we were right at the end in this country of Black people being on TV the way that they were in the 90s. So in the 90s, it was like everywhere, all the time, Black, 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 but it was Black, and it was meant to oftentimes be read as like, I'm not going to go down that road, but it was a very particular kind of Blackness. And, you know, there were a lot of shows like Living Single that offered you really beautiful and complex, nuanced versions of Blackness. But, you know, it was oftentimes just a lot of comedic Black experiences and not very seriously weighted Black experiences. And, you know, Girlfriends came and went and unfortunately didn't get the love that it deserved. So when I thought about how this man, he didn't know much. So throughout the whole shoot, he would be like, all right, what am I doing now? And it allowed us to really talk the whole time. And I got really comfortable with him. I remember he would do a face up like, I don't think you should ever do that face ever for any purpose. And we was just like, he was hilarious. We laughed from the time the shoot began until the time the shoot ended. He was wonderful. And I will always think very fondly of that experience. And that's extremely rare because people look at my work and they think, oh, wow, the photos are intimate and they're personal. You can see that I love Black people more than anything in this life. And that like my approach to it is very much walking down the street, see somebody doing something interesting or looking great, or just people that I see so much that I'm like, I got to make a photograph of this person. And like, I do that. And then they read something in that image, something personal, something quiet, something honest. And they love that. And then they hire me to do that, but they do it. They're like, go photograph like this really grand person, but get intimate with this. Like, that's not ever going to happen. There's no intimacy. There's 35 people on the set. You know, there are people breathing down my neck and this person's neck. There's no intimacy. So when you see, you know, people who make work like mine get editorial jobs, it loses a lot of the things that makes the work great, because it's just a sterilized world. I'm never gonna, like, if they go, hey, can you photograph Rihanna? Great. I'm never going to be able to photograph Rihanna in her childhood home in Barbados, right? Like, I'm never going to be able to get, that's what I would need. I want to photograph Rihanna at a family reunion. Like, I want to photograph her with her people, or in a space in which she's going to let down her guard and maybe give me something. But once you get to a certain scale, you just can't get something. So in the beginnings, I was trying to, like, with Omari Hardwick, we had such a limited time with him, and we did talk, but it was such a limited shoot. Like, it wasn't like we got to know each other deeply. And he was wonderful. But like, I really wish that, because I used to say that I try to approach everybody the same, and I know that I tried to do so, but it's just not possible. And I think that that's unfortunate, and it really makes me, and I'm in this point in my career now where it's making me wonder what kind of work I want to do moving forward, but also it's making me kind of turn things down differently. Because if I know that this is going to be the type of shoot where I'm going to get ran through, where my voice is going to get silenced, where I'm not going to walk away with any images that feel like mine, then it's okay to be like, no, I'm good. So yeah, it's tough. It's really difficult.
I know that we only set up to only be talking for like 10 minutes.
Did we?
Kicking it to the gear. You wanted to go back.
I'm tired.
You try to do. Don't do that.
I'm tired. I don't know what
Don't do that. Before we jet though, I want to talk a bit about our process in terms of you know, like when I approached you and said, yeah, this is commissioned by Jerwood as a fellow. Oh yeah, that sounds so good. As one of the fellows, this is the idea, and I was like, I'm writing this essay, and you were just like, at last, because you've been on me to get this shit done.
Let's talk about process on your end, sweetie.
My God.
Of me asking you to write this essay in Beyonce's 2018, and you getting this essay to me in Satan's 2020. Okay. Let's talk about that.
It's been, because I don't know about you, but I was a little bit nervous. I was just like, yo, how is this gonna work? How's the language gonna be? Because I appreciate your criticism. I appreciate your eye. I feel like even in your images, there are stories. It's on top of that, you're a writer as well. So I'm really interested in just wanting to discuss just because my language is different. Like I'm using this kind of lingo and different kind of talk. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, what's this?
Very much.
And then it's a bit of awkward because like, yo, this is my friend, but I can't really shit too bad on this. Like, how do I manage this? So it's it's you know, it's just, yeah, it was a really good process to just kind of talk through just how this was going to happen. I was super nervous in sending you the first draft of it. And this is a journey of it that's just starting, you know. It's going to hopefully grow into like a bigger piece in terms of just where it touches down going forward. But how was that for you? How do you see do you want to write to some of your own images sometimes? Like, how did you have a thought of how you wanted these images to come out in words type thing? Am I making sense? I don't know if I'm making any sense at all.
I think you are. So I had narratives in my mind that kind of strung the pieces together. And I definitely, when you work in editorial, a lot of the times it's really difficult to think outside of those confines. So I definitely had, as I was looking at the images the first time that I came back from London, and I developed the film, I was looking at the images and I was like, okay, this feels like this could work for the look for the New York Times, because it was the look does a great job of centering photographs equally to centering the text, but that it not being dependent on the other, that these two things kind of live alongside each other very eloquently. And that's how I always thought about this, because the images were never meant to assert anything, because I know and would never presume that I have the authority to know anything about what it's like to be Black in London. So when I first had the idea of the images, so I came to London, if I'm not mistaken, the first time was in October, and then I came right back in February because I was addicted. And when I came back the second time, I reached out to you and a girlfriend of mine, Huda, who's a brilliant human being, and I wanted her to write about what it was like being a Muslim woman going to school in London and having to wear a uniform that respects her, her experience, and also kind of acclimatizes the way that you need to in uniform. And then also I wanted your experience about being born in Nigeria and going to school there for a period and then coming here. So I just wanted it to have, so I was like thinking the gender piece was really specific because, it's important to have both perspectives. And I remember the most interesting thing was like, Huda was telling me about what it was like when she grew breasts when she was in high school, and she had a growth spurt and her breasts began to grow. But what it was like to have to, like, the shirts are really like this, and she like very like tight and not expansive, not spacious, not like made from great fabric, and it like would hurt her as her breasts grew to wear these shirts and had to like push herself down. It's not very like, it is fit very masculinely or without a lot of like thought towards women. And yeah, so I really wanted to get that perspective, and so that's how I thought about the images. I didn't want to say much about my opinions or my thoughts. I was just hoping to express curiosity in the photographs and comfort in the photographs. Like, as I was making the images, they were very comfortable. Everybody was very comfortable. Everybody enjoyed the process. But then there were moments where like they're images of like young people who don't look very enthusiastic to have me there as a voyeur. And they just said yes, but maybe they didn't want to be photographed that day, or I was inconveniencing them. And I thought that was an important visual too. So yeah, I thought a narrative had naturally cropped up about identity and who these children were with and without these uniforms. But I didn't want to assert anything else.
I listen. Those some images that you took of me in 2018, I have not seen them now. Maybe 4 or 5 of them I've got. So don't talk to me about like Satan's 2020. I might be looking for a heavenly 2024, and I could get maybe 4 images and see how that. So process definitely works. It takes time.
That's true. In my work,
it takes time.
I don't ever show, like, I literally do not show people photographs for a very long time. The only exception usually is when I'm making images on the street, because it is so transactional a lot of the time. And the very least that you can do is send the people the photographs. But then that becomes complicated too. If you lose an email address, if somebody wrote it down wrong, if like you got to run and give somebody a physical print and you'll never see them no more. Like, but the process for this was definitely like hoarding the images. I've never published any of them. I only published briefly the 2 to advertise that this was happening.
It sits with you. It lives with you until you're ready to let it fly. If your work could be a song, what would it be?
Oh my God. What a question. Oh my God. Wow.
If you're
I'm thinking of the saddest songs in like American history. Oh my God.
You want to stick?
Okay. I'm gonna pretend that it's "Young, Gifted, and Black" by Nina Simone, her version of that song. It would be something from Nina Simone. I think about Nina Simone a lot when I'm making images, because I think it would be something by Nina Simone that doesn't feel dishonest, specifically because Nina Simone always has such a sadness to every song that she sings, no matter what she's singing about, no matter who she loves or what she's in love with. It seems like she's always singing from a place of sadness. Her music seems corrective, like it doesn't seem responsive. So I really think a lot about, like, even in I Love You, Porgy, which is like a love song, but it's a sad love song. Like everything that she does just has a weight to it. And I think about, I'm a very sad person kind of by nature. And I think that the work that I do and that I try to do is very serious. It doesn't matter if it feels light, if it feels joyful, if it's about beauty in this moment and not about beauty in the next. It's very serious. And I think, you know, those two things really do sound like Nina Simone to me. So it would be something by Nina Simone. I think it would be Young, Gifted, and Black for this project. I think it would be I Love You, Porgy, maybe for all Black people. Yeah, that is a question. Wow, Yomi, oh my God.
And on that amazing note, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to you just coming back to London and just spending some time.
Hopefully next month. Come on, y'all. Put your masks on, y'all. Put your masks on, girls. Let's get our masks on. Shit. I want to get on a flight.
Yo, thank you so much. We'll talk.
Of course. Thank you, darling. Talk